Welcome to Trailblazing Tex, and today we have Anna Wiernicki, who is a Washington correspondent with Nexstar Media Group. And throughout her career, she has interviewed quite impressive group of people, starting with current President Donald Trump, the First Lady Ivanka Trump, and other folks like Rick Perry and congressional leaders such as Senator John Cornyn, Senator Mark Warner, and Representative Steve Scalise. So happy to have you on. How are you doing, Anna?
That was quite the introduction. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing all right, just enjoying some of the quarantine life, the world that we have currently found ourselves in.
Yep, I feel like we're all in the same boat here.
For sure. And so you're located in DC, obviously, as a Washington correspondent. And so what has been like a big difference currently in DC? I know right now being the spring, a lot of times you have like middle school tours going on, a lot of tourism around the cherry blossoms and stuff like that earlier. What's it like in DC right now?
It's literally empty. It's usually this time, like you said, full of 8th grade tours. Now I go and I've resulted to going on like power walks in the morning because in my heart, I'm like 67 years old. And it's empty. I mean, it is crazy. You can cross the street with honestly, like in the middle of the street, which you could never do before. There's no traffic, anything. It's kind of eerie, but it is a little nice too at the same time, not having all those 8th grade tours.
Yeah, for sure. And so what hasn't changed though? I mean, it's the capital of the United States. So even though traffic's light and stores are closed and stuff like that, what on the Hill hasn't really changed?
Well, Congress is still here. Like today, Senate's in session. They've been coming back and forth for the past couple of weeks, but since the Senate's here and if Congress is in session, we still have to work and most of us have to be on Capitol Hill still. So that hasn't changed and the White House is still carrying on as usual. So
yeah, so business as usual. So no surprise there. So did want to do a little bit of backtracking as to how we know each other actually. Anna and I have known each other since probably I was in 6th grade. So you would have been in 5th grade. We played middle school basketball together. Visited you guys when you lived in London when we were in high school. And so one thing about Anna, before we kicked off this recording, Anna was telling me how she ordered like a whole box of sugar cookies just for kicks. And that's definitely been a strong bond of ours is food. And so one of my favorite stories about Anna, and I love telling this story, is that before basketball practice in high school, we'd go to Wendy's. And we went to Wendy's, we go to the drive-thru, and Anna opens up her wallet and a French fry falls out of her wallet. So 1, you went to Wendy's without me, and 2, you got a French fry in your wallet, and I don't understand how it happened. But to this day, one of my fondest memories, and you've come a long way from French fries in your wallet to the Hill.
I don't know if I quite have, because if anyone who knows me is watching this, it's like no one would be surprised to this day. I mean, I'm obsessed with French fries. I still eat them all the time. I don't have them in my wallet anymore, so I graduated from that sense.
Yeah, and I remember at one point you even tweeted on your account about like who has the best French fries, and it was like a really big deal.
It was a debate in our newsroom, but our newsroom in DC has never had Whataburger before, and so it was like trying to explain to them that In-N-Out French fries are cardboard, but Whataburger is just like godsend. They just didn't get it. It was so frustrating.
Well, I was definitely on your side for that one. I was definitely team Anna, team Whataburger as well. So shout out to Whataburger because we both don't live in Texas anymore and we miss it. But let's switch gears here a little bit. So wanted to talk to you about your career, but also wanted to talk to you about something that's a little bit more serious. So you recently have recovered from COVID-19.
I did, yes. I'm fully recovered now, but
okay.
It took a little bit of time.
Awesome. And definitely happy to hear that. I think I kind of found out probably when the general public found out. I think you tweeted about it. And so you kept it obviously very private for a while, which is to be expected. But my first question is what made you decide to get tested? Like, did you have symptoms? Was it something that you had to do with your organization that you work for or what?
Well, so when coronavirus first came to the United States, I've only reported about that for like months now. So it's been like coronavirus in my brain for like 24/7 for, I would say 3 or 4 months. And so we all kind of transitioned to the work from home, but we still kind of have to go to the Capitol. We still have to go to the White House if necessary. So I'm still being exposed, just not as much. And we're still being careful, like, wearing the gloves, wearing the mask, always washing our hands, hand sanitizer. I did all that. But then it was one Monday morning, I woke up and I was just feeling really sore. And I thought, maybe it was allergies. I don't know, because it was just like a congestion, like kind of like a cold. But then every day that week, it kind of got a little bit worse. And so I was like, okay, if it was allergies or, cold, it would have gone away. So I called my doctor and she was like, you know what, let's just be safe. Let's just go get you tested. At least I rule it out. And sure enough, I tested positive.
And like, so you, outside of your body feeling sore though, did you have any of the other symptoms that people were talking about, like shortness of breath and coughing and stuff like that?
I did. So after a week, it was like the body soreness was like joint pain was the worst I've ever experienced. So that was just something that was just constant and kept me up at night. But I did end up having to get an inhaler about the second week, and just like total exhaustion over my body. I would I literally did not leave my room, my bedroom for a week, and I would get up to just like walk to my bathroom, and I was like heaving for air, which is not normal. So I that's when I got the inhaler, and it did work. So that was
nice. And so you said you were kind of like in bed for a week, but from start to finish, how long did it really take you to like be 100% okay?
I would say by like 2.5 weeks, I was like feeling, all the symptoms were gone. I also never had a fever, which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so the doctor didn't really know like when the end is, because the end is usually like when your fever goes away.
Yeah.
So it was like 2.5 weeks to 3 weeks. I mean, it was
wow.
long.
Yeah. And I think that's the scary part about the virus right now is it seems that everyone's experience are very different. And so, you didn't have a fever. Meanwhile, some people are like, yeah, the first symptom I had was a fever. And so to be honest, you were the first person that I knew directly that had tested positive. So it was kind of an interesting shift in perspective when you all of a sudden know someone, and we don't live close to each other or anything like that, but all of a sudden it was like, wow, like it starts to hit home when that type of thing happens. So you kind of were stuck in your room, you were trying to heal and get better. I would imagine, did you get any nice videos from your little niece to help you feel better?
Oh my gosh, I would FaceTime her all the time. I think she was getting annoyed with me. She already gets annoyed with me as is, but I'm like, she's like the best thing that's ever happened. I didn't even do anything. It was my sister's daughter. And I'm like, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
So much.
So Anna has an older sister that's graduated with me and is a year younger than I am. And so her sister had a baby. How old is your niece now?
You were there at, you met her at the baby shower too.
Yeah.
So that's Charlotte. She's over a year now, about 1.5 years, I want to say.
Okay. And so what's your favorite thing about being an aunt? I feel like being an aunt or an uncle is like one of the greatest roles that you can have.
I think my favorite thing is that I can like get her like really excited and like put a smile on her face, and she gets like really hyper. But then my sister's like, she needs to go to bed. And I'm like, okay, no, you can take her to bed now. So I like get her like amped up and I like pass her along. It's not my problem anymore, right?
Yeah. How often do you get to see her? I feel like pretty decently.
I usually see her often, but I haven't obviously now past couple months, which is crazy because she's literally grown so much. Last time I saw her, she wasn't walking, and now she's basically running.
Yeah.
So,
that's pretty crazy. Yeah. I mean, the amount that kids develop at that age, like if you miss a month, you've missed, a ton of time, but hopefully once this passes, you guys, can see each other with that. So you've been away from Texas for a while. You've been away from your family in different locations. And so you're in DC doing the Washington Correspondent, you're doing political journalism. Is it something that you've always been interested in, journalism, and then specifically political journalism?
Yeah, I would definitely say that I majored in political science. So I knew that that was kind of eventually the path I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. But I also had this interest in and curiosity of like journalism. We didn't really, you and I, so actually just so everyone knows, we also know each other because we run yearbook together. And we were the sports editors together for the yearbook. So I knew I kind of like writing, and I knew I kind of liked like journalism a little bit, but we didn't really have like a news station at our high school or anything like that. Yeah. Like a lot of people who do journalism, they start so young. So I kind of just like took a leap of faith and went for and wanted to combine both, and here I love it. So
yeah. And so you studied poli-sci at George Washington in DC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I fell in love with DC when I was here. So that's kind of what drew me back. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And also going back to your book, shout out to Miss Boating. God bless that woman. But hey,
we were crazy.
We did it though. That yearbook came out every year. came out every year.
It did, absolutely.
Okay, so poli-sci, GW in DC, you fell in love with it. So after you graduated, you found yourself in West Texas. So bring us through kind of that, how you went from DC to West Texas and that whole journey.
So I wanted to go, so, you know, you leave Texas and everything draws you back to, if you've been to Texas, you know that. Not only is it the greatest state, but it has Whataburger too. But I knew after I graduated, I did want to get back to my family for at least a little bit. My mom wanted me back home in Texas, or at least close by.
Yeah.
So that Christmas break, I flew home and I jumped in the car with my mom and we kind of just did a road trip around the state and just visited random TV stations. So if you're not familiar with local TV, you basically kind of start small and work your way up. So I basically just mapped out all these like random TV stations, popped in the car, and we just drove. And I was cold knocking on a lot of these stations' doors. Ended up getting just sitting down with the news director in Lubbock, and you know, he liked me enough to offer me a job, which was, you know, that's all I needed. When I graduated, I was really excited, so I accepted it. But little did I know that, you know, Lubbock, even though it's in Texas, it's still 8 hours away by car. People of West Texas were the sweetest people I've ever met, and they'll always have a special place in my heart. I still report for them actually now.
Oh, nice.
So it's kind of cool. But God bless my first news director.
Yeah. So my brother lives in West Texas, and Midland's what, hour and a half, 2 hours from Lubbock?
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
And he'll say the same thing.
Probably the closest city to Lubbock is Midland.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And James will say the same thing, that people in West Texas are the kindest people, you know, very hospitable. And, you know, even though it's in the middle of nowhere and it's far away from other things, like people who spend time out there end up looking back on it fondly, even though you look at a map and you're like, where are we? And so, so glad to hear that. So you did Lubbock. And then you found yourself in Texas capital of Austin. So how did that come about?
So my boss, Russ, I was like the only person in the Lubbock newsroom that was like pitching like city council meetings to cover. So they all knew I liked politics. And so a job opened up at the bureau in Austin. They were creating this bureau to report for like all the 10 stations in Texas. And so he asked if I wanted it, and I said, absolutely. And found myself moving to Austin, Texas. It was a lot closer to the Woodlands.
Yeah. And so when you were in Austin, I take it that's probably like your first real stab at like being kind of in the middle of politics going on.
I went right in the beginning of session in Texas, and it was like 0 to 100 overnight. You picked up fast. But I will say, again, you're still in Texas, so everyone's so hospitable. Even like the lawmakers, like it's you kind of just feel like family. Everyone's kind of welcoming you into the beat there. So that was really nice.
Yeah. And what's the, you know, for those of you who aren't familiar with Texas, you know, each city in Texas is very different. They have their own identities, but I would say Austin probably has its own identity outside of it. The saying, keep Austin weird, exists for a reason. But what was your favorite thing about Austin?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. I would say my friends and the food. The food there was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I've not had a better breakfast taco in my entire life than in Austin, Texas. And it's just kind of a cool city. It's like I tell anyone if they've never been to Texas, and I think you might agree, to go to Austin first, because you still get the Texas experience, because everyone kind of, if you've never been, you kind of like, do people walk around in cowboy hats? Not necessarily. Yeah. But you still get, you walk into a bar and there's a band playing, and you still get like that small town, big city feel. So I would say Austin, I appreciated that for that.
Yeah, actually, this is kind of ridiculous, but Joe Jonas has like his own little show, and it's called like Cup of Joe, and him and like Matthew McConaughey walk around Austin, and I only caught glimpses of it. But one thing that Matthew McConaughey talks about is like, Austin's obviously growing. It's becoming a big city, but they're trying to keep the essence of Austin, right? Kind of this smaller town. There's a lot of culture. There's music there. There's good foods. Very neighborhoody type of vibes. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, like Houston is a big metropolis, and so is Dallas Fort Worth. So Austin's trying to make this transition into a big metropolis, but also keep the essence that why people like Austin, because it is a smaller city, and a lot of history there as well. Did you float the Guadalupe a lot while you lived out there?
I did. Have you done that?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. highly would recommend if you've never, it's a fun Texas experience as well in the summer. All right. I'm sure people are kind of tired about hearing about Texas, but I personally could talk about it all day.
I could talk forever.
Yes, but great experience in Austin, gave you kind of your first go around with being kind of in the middle of politics, and then you landed in DC. So how did that jump happen? I know there's contracts and stuff like that in your world, so kind of walk us through how that came about.
Kind of, the same thing as I got my first job is I literally let everyone knew I wanted this job in DC. I knew that there was they were building a bureau here. And I made sure that like my resume, my name was at the top of like everyone who was important enough to hire me list and on their desk. And so when they officially announced the launch of the bureau, I was just calling people and like letting them know like, hey, remember me? And just being just consistent about that. Finally, you know, my boss now, he called me, he was like, look, everyone's telling me I should hire you. Why? And I got the job. So that was, it was pretty incredible. I was very young. He even said, he was like, I usually don't hire people this young, but I am so thankful to.
For sure. Yeah. And I think actually that's a good point. You know, one thing, a theme or a motif, however you want to define it, of this podcast too, is blazing your own trail, right? And I think you did that. You kind of took the steps, you set yourself up for that success, and who knew when it was going to come, but you had to be ready, right? And so when the opportunity presented itself, you were ready to make that leap. You put all of the work in, you took the necessary steps. And so, you know, it takes a little bit of luck, a little bit of networking, but also a lot of hard work to kind of blaze that trail for you. And now, you know, now you're working in Washington at a very interesting time. We can call it polarizing, we can call it entertaining, we can call it interesting, whatever we want to define it as. And I definitely, for you and also those listening, this is not going to become a political conversation or anything like that. But since it is such a polarized time or interesting time, you know, what has been some of your favorite projects or stories that you have been able to kind of follow and report on throughout your time in DC?
That is actually just as hard question, because things that I've covered like a couple months ago that were so big, like the Supreme Court, now like Brett Kavanaugh, for example, that was huge. That took up so much time here. That seems like so long ago.
Yes. Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day that, you know, 2020 has been so crazy, and I had to remind them that the impeachment happened in 2020.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I totally forgot about that too. Yeah. Impeachment, you name like Brett, just like the things that have gone through Congress that they've tackled, having a White House where it's just so like you can, you know, being able to walk in, there's a lot, there's news every day.
Yeah.
I've also never reported under any other administration. So I always say like, wow, this is crazy. And I'll talk to these veteran photographers and they're like, it's not always this crazy.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, it's interesting to walk into this time when it feels like every other week is like some big event.
Groundbreaking. Yeah.
So that it's hard to say like pin down one thing. I would say that sticks out. I would say every week is something different. Like even just right now, I've been interviewing senators on Skype in my room. Like that's weird. Yeah.
Well, that's cool though. Like it's great that they're still accessible despite the world that we're living in. And so, you know, what's the date today? It's May, first week of May.
Like what date?
Yeah. And you know, you think about what's happened. We've had the impeachment, we have the pandemic, things have been closed down for months. And then before you know it, we're going to have an election. So it's like mentally, it's hard to put our mind around the fact that there's more craziness to come. And so, you know, for you, I'm sure it's daunting, but also exciting as a reporter, because you just have no idea like what direction things can be going. But also I think one thing that's going to be interesting, whatever happens in 2020 or even the election that follows, like as a political reporter right now, I think it has to be an incredibly exciting, odd time also. But you know, I think you're where you're supposed to be, and you're definitely going to observe some pretty monumental type of moments, whatever they may be. But one thing that I did want to talk about, I think one of my favorite things that because I keep up with you, I find your stories very interesting, and you're very active on social media too, so it's easy to follow you. But your story where you did a border the project down on the border. And so, you know, I don't remember how many days it was, but you went from San Diego.
Yep, all the way to Brownsville. We drove the whole way.
How many miles was that?
That I should know the answer to that. At one point I did know the answer to that. It was like, I want to say like 4,000 miles. Like,
hold on. We have the interwebs readily available.
Yeah.
So
I think I could probably even find it on
Brownsville, Texas. San Diego to Brownsville, Texas is.
Am I correct? This is a fun game.
No, you're really
off. So off.
It's 1,500 miles.
1,500 miles. Wow. Okay.
I was gonna say 4,000 miles is a long way.
Well, okay. So, but that you're talking about direct, because the Texas-Mexico border, isn't it? The Texas-Mexico border 2,000 miles long. Something
like that. So yeah, that's just direct. Like if you found the most direct path, that's 1,500 miles. But I guess you're right. If you drove the border,
2,000 miles. Yeah. Yeah, I'm very wrong. So there you go. Thanks for
fact checking.
Yeah, I needed that. Clearly.
No fake news here.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, so that was cool. Yeah, it was 10 days, and we turned a story every single day, and we were like, let's go down there, take politics completely out of the border, because this is when we went down there. It was kind of like the middle of the border wall talk, and border has just been such a hot topic here in Washington.
Sure.
So we wanted to get out of Washington and just like talk to the people who live there. And we did, and it was honestly the coolest thing I think I've ever done.
Yeah.
And we only it was quick. We only were able to stay on the U.S. side of the border, just for just because it was just so quick too. We were on a timeline, and I think if I ever went back, I would love to go and cross the border and kind of talk to the people
on the other side.
On the other side, but also a lot of people we talk to on the U.S. side live in Mexico, and they come over to the U.S. every day, just like it's crossing the street. It's pretty interesting to see the problems and the concerns of the people there versus like what we hear every day in Washington. So
and I think that's what I enjoyed about it was almost refreshing because it was kind of raw and honest, and you heard both sides of the argument. And me as just like a regular citizen, I read the news and I try to educate myself, but it's a lot of times what's coming from Washington or what's coming from media outlets. And so this was just, like I said, raw and honest, and it kind of allows you to kind of peel back the onion a little bit and realize, why people are for or against it. And so I thought it was a very honest way to document this. And I thought there was, like you said, you took politics completely out of it. It was just,
we didn't even talk politics the entire time. Sometimes they mentioned it, but we never once talked about anything going on in Washington. We were just, hey, how's it going? What's your life like?
Yeah. And so let me ask you this, as a political reporter, I know you do a very good job at not projecting your political views. You stay very neutral. How do you guide that ship? Like when you're interviewing, no matter who it is, and they try to take you down that road, how do you find yourself bringing it back so you're not going down that conversation?
So I think that the interesting thing is that everyone you talk to, they're expecting, a reaction, or not a reaction, but every lawmaker they're very good at crafting their answers, whoever it may be. And I mean, that's how they got into office. So you're asking a Republican, so you're gonna, say, hey, Democrats say this, what's your reaction? You ask a Democrat, you say, hey, Republicans think this, what's your reaction? And so you kind of just have to play the middle ground, or just devil's advocate, depending on who you're talking to, because a lot of the times the person who you're talking to genuinely believes what they're saying. Yeah. And so, try to figure out why. Like, even if you don't believe that yourself, they have a reason to think that, and let them explain it, for sure. But then, always bring up the other side too. So it is interesting, but I think that it kind of just comes down to an equation here when you're
yeah.
Accepted.
And as you mentioned, they're very good at crafting their answers. There's a reason a lot of them were lawyers in their past life. But no, and I think
sometimes you can ask a question and they give a good 3 or 4 minute response, and you're sitting there and you're like, I don't think they answered the question at all.
No, I was watching an interview.
This topic.
I was watching an interview the other day. I won't say who, but there was a lot of long answers, and I felt myself being like, I don't think the answer was
the question.
Yeah, I don't think there was an answer in that, but it was a long response, so I'm just gonna kind of
go along with it. Yeah.
So, but I think that's a good point that you bring up, though, is kind of hearing people out. I think that's important right now, because people have opinions, and we come from different walks of life, right? Like we were raised in the suburbs. And so our concerns and our thoughts and experiences are a little bit different than someone who grew up in the city or rural. And so there's like, if you hear people out, you kind of understand where they're coming from. You don't have to agree, but you at least can like understand that they're not just like spewing this out of nowhere, right? There's a reason for these type of things. And so I think that's very pertinent today. I wish people would practice it a little bit more. But with that, interviewing people, like I mentioned, you've interviewed some pretty cool people. The fact that you, at such a young age, have interviewed the President of the United States, I think is incredible. Who's, maybe the coolest person for whatever reason that you've interviewed, whether it's, you just like them a lot or it was the President of the United States, the leader of the free world. Who's some of your favorites that you've interviewed?
So I think it's just depending on what the story is that day, because there's some, if you're in news, you'd kind of understand. I mean, I guess everyone would understand this, but like just getting that one interview that was just so hard, no one thought you were gonna be able to get it, even if it's just like an administrator or, somebody, speaking on behalf of something, or, they may not be a big name, but that day it was just so hard to get in. If you like nailed it down, like that feeling of just being able to grab that interview where not a lot of people were, that's like the coolest thing. Obviously, like, interviewing the president, like you said, was very cool, a very cool experience in general. I will never forget that, and I will tell my grandkids that one day. But I do think it's like the day-to-day interviews that I really, really do appreciate. And also just like hearing people's stories that, you can start talking to someone and, have no idea, where they're coming from or what their story is. And it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And, honestly, what I do on this podcast is nothing like what you do, but I will agree with you on the telling the stories. So like today, trying to line up some other people and, someone put me in contact with a police officer, and just hearing this guy's story was incredible. I didn't know him from Adam, right? This was the first time I spoke to him. And, I have to ask, some questions that you don't normally ask someone the first time you meet them. And I just find it really intriguing to get to know people kind of in this setting. Like, I don't know, I find it kind of a safe space. I hate using that word, but.
No, I agree with that. And I think that like, when you talk to him, he probably doesn't think that what he's saying is that interesting. So he may not pull back a little bit, but you're thinking, wow, that's really cool. But to him, it's his
story. Yeah, exactly. It's his story. And that's one thing that I want, like, that's how I feel. I'm like, my story's not that cool, but Anna's is cool.
But then I'm saying the complete opposite. So it's really cool to like kind of pull that out of people.
Yeah, I definitely, and going back to our yearbook roots, that was actually my favorite thing, was like tracking people down. And even if it was like getting a quote or just like a small blurb, like it was just my favorite thing to hear people say, like, why did you like playing this sport, or what did this award mean to you, or whatever. Like, I found that always so interesting. And now, since you brought up yearbook in this, like, I'm starting to reflect on actually how influential yearbook was, even though Miss Boating was begging me to constantly stay rather than leave class early. But no, like, I'm with you. I feel you on that one. And so if there was someone you could interview, dead or alive, who do you think it would be?
So I will say that the one person that I wish I had sat down with a long time ago would be my grandfather. And I think just getting like stories down and just, like I said, just picking his brain and just having him talk. I wouldn't even have to probably say anything in the interview. But that's the one thing I do wish I had reported that I don't.
And so your grandfather actually has a book, right?
Yeah.
And it's about, so Anna's grandfather is a Holocaust survivor. And I remember us growing up and him coming to speak to us. I don't know if it was every year, but I definitely remember him being there.
Grandparents' Day, he would always be down there.
Oh, okay. That's what it was. And so I definitely remember him being there, sharing his story. And so, give us, a quick Spark Notes version of what the book is about.
It's just, his time. He was a Polish resistance fighter. He was captured, went to Auschwitz, face to face with, some of the scariest people that we read about in history. And then he was able to escape, when they were marching from one campsite to the other. So I think, I obviously love his story, and I think it's powerful, but I think it's just a powerful story in general. But that's one person I really wish I I think.
Yeah, that's fair. No, I mean, I would absolutely 100% agree with that. And so sure, very proud of what you're doing today. Strong story there as well. All right.